All right, welcome back to video number 2 of Colorado property updates. So this second property that I will be talking about is a property that we purchased or that I purchased subject to. That means I took over somebody's existing loan payments back in January of last year. When we took it over, the seller was in pre-foreclosure and it was an on-market deal, meaning that it was listed on the MLS. So I called and spoke with the real estate agent and pitched or discussed a non-traditional offer. They were unable to sell this property on the market for what it was listed at. And that's because they owed quite a bit of money on arrears, which were back payments. And then there was also a water softener. Now they bought this property with a VA loan, which allowed them to put no money down. So it was tough for them. They didn't have any equity to sell the property. We took it over with a 2.625% interest rate. And as you know, now in 2024, those may never come back. Super beneficial for us as investors to buy a property with an interest rate under 4%. And anything under 3% is like crazy good. So we took this over, and our monthly payment was a total of, I think it was like 1858. I think our principal and interest payment was 1585, 1535, something like that. Let's just say it was under 1900 for our total monthly payment. And then rent in the area is probably 23 to 2500. It's a big house, 5 beds, 3.5 baths, 3,000 square foot, 2-story with a basement, full finished basement with a full bath downstairs. And so we ended up selling this on owner finance, or what we like to call a wrap. So we listed it on the market with our agent that I actually purchased the house through originally. Her name is Tess. She's awesome. And it took a while to find somebody who wanted to come in and buy the house, because typically we're looking for, roughly a, 8 to 10% down payment. Now, when the value of the house is around 500,000, that puts a down payment at like 40 to 50,000. And nobody seems to have that kind of money, or at least at that time, nobody was willing to put that kind of money towards purchasing a home with a 6% interest rate, is which we ended up selling it at, amortized over 35 years. So what that means is basically the longer the amortization schedule, the lower the payment, right? So you're paying it off over that many years. Now, I guess one downside could be the longer you pay it off, the more interest you end up paying. But, we try to work with our buyers based off of what monthly payment they can afford, or that they want to put toward buying a house. So let's say it was June, I think we ended up finding a buyer, which was this family that we currently have in the property. And then within the first 2 months, we got notification that their payment, they had insufficient funds in their bank account. So when we sell a house, or when we rent a house out, typically what a lot of people do, they will set up a third-party servicing company, which basically keeps track of payments. And so, if and when we wanted to sell the note to a note investor, which is a thing, you want to make sure that you have the proper documentation, and you go through the proper channels and underwriting the buyer, whatever the case may be. We probably didn't do everything by the book, so not sure if we could have ever sold a note, but it doesn't matter at this point, and I'll let you know why. Okay, fast forward to, I mean, look, when when we sold this to the family, obviously we were trying to help a family get into a home to purchase, right? When they could not otherwise qualify for, traditional financing, whether it's because of their income or their credit score or whatever else all the banks recommend or require for traditional financing. Um, so right away, within the first couple of months, the payment didn't go through, and so we made the agreement to allow them to send in a um, check every month, not a personal check, but a cashier's check. And so for a couple months, they paid on time, and then ever since then, it's kind of been hit or miss, right? Like they'd be late on a payment, and then we'd have to message them and let them know that they were late on the payment. Now, mind you, when you do this, we gave them a 2 week grace period. So, which is another lesson that I've learned not to do, where let's just say the mortgage is due on the first. Well, they had until the 15th to pay. Well, the problem now lies where, let's say they pay on the 15th, right? Well, when they receive payment, the servicing company then writes a freaking physical check and mails it to the lender, to pay that underlying loan payment. Well, by the time that they receive that check and deposits into the account, well, shit, it's almost time to pay the next month's mortgage, right? And if they don't pay until the 15th, which is when it's due, well, then it takes an additional 3 to 5 days for the servicer to send it, right? So now we're going to be late. So then if they don't pay by, let's call it the 8th, right? If they pay by the 8th or sooner, there's enough time for the servicer to write a physical check and send it out, and for the lender to get it and mark it down as paid. So anyway, so we're always struggling with having to pay the mortgage ourselves because we weren't getting our payments in time for the servicer to send it to the lender. So that was like the first problem. And so with them constantly being late and the servicer not being able to send the check in time, it was always a juggling act of trying to get the mortgage paid, the underlying mortgage paid on time. And so after like a few months, the servicing company was like, look, we don't really want to service this loan if if we're going to have to keep cutting you a check for a reimbursement, because that is like defeats the whole purpose of what we're trying to accomplish here. Essentially what they said. Fast forward to like, you know, April, April of 2024. They don't pay their mortgage. And so after the 15th, we send them a notice. And by this time, they had been late numerous times, right? So we've given them the benefit of the doubt. So they were late on that in April after the 15th. And so by law, we're supposed to, we have to send them basically it's a notice of default. Like, hey, you're in default. You have 30 days to make this payment, or we can continue with our legal options, which essentially is a foreclosure. Now, anybody that has had to foreclose on somebody or that's gone through a foreclosure, like that's probably one of the worst things possible, not only for the person in the house, but us as a lender or as a homeowner. Well, I guess as a note holder, not as the homeowner, because they are. Essentially, if the house goes to auction or we foreclose on them, the house goes to auction and we lose the house to whoever buys it at the auction. Well, I don't want that. This has a 2.6% interest rate. And I'm like, crap. So when I found that out, man, I didn't really know what to do. I'm like, well, shoot, if they call my bluff and say, hey, we don't believe he's going to foreclose on us, well, I wouldn't know what to do. So that was April. May comes around. Obviously, they didn't pay. The communication is awful. Like we sent them an email saying, hey, look, you're in default now 2 months. Um, or maybe it was 6 weeks at the time. Like, hey, let's work together on figuring out a solution that works for you to be able to stay in the house. Like, we don't want to foreclose. Like, that's the worst thing for everybody. It stays on your record for 7 to 10 years. We lose the house. I didn't tell her that. But I mean, that's the reality of the situation. Like, we really truly wanted to work with them on keeping the house. So, like, we gave them a few different options in our letter to them saying, hey, look, like, if you guys want out of the house, what we can do is you can either deed the property back to us and we'll sign off on the money owed, right? Like, we'll forego it. We won't even come after you for the money you owe. Just sign the property back to us. That was one option. Probably not the best option for them if they wanted to stay in the house. Secondarily, they told us, hey, we can afford a certain amount of money less. And so I talked to my partner and we're like, well, what if we just charge that much less for X amount of time while we look for a new buyer? Because they wanted to find somebody to assume their loan. Well, it doesn't necessarily work like that. As the lender, we determine whether or not the loan is assumable. And we don't want somebody assuming the loan and them trying to get out of what they owe us, right? Because now at this time it was only 2 months, but now it's 3 months of mortgage payments, which is close to $10,000 plus penalties and late fees. So we gave them the option of, hey, you can pay less, and while we look for somebody to take over that loan, we will find somebody to take over that loan, because what we would do is we would have them put another down payment down in order to take over that loan. So let's just say they owe 470,000 on their loan. We would charge them, I don't know. I don't know what we would charge them. Let's call it 25,000. 25,000 would pay off what essentially they're behind, right? And then it would give us enough to put into an oh crap fund, which I'm realizing now is more important than originally discussed, more important than cash flow for sure. Um, so that was one option, or they could try to sell it themselves, which is not going to happen because the house is not worth what they owe on it in its current condition. So we give them these options and they're like, okay, cool. Give us till the end of the week to come up with a decision, right? Like, they've been using this same excuse for multiple months at this point. And so we kind of figured that they weren't going to come up with a decision. And so we stayed on them after that week. I emailed them back saying, hey, have you figured it out? And then basically, like, the next day after I sent that text message or email, I got an email from them, which states that they have filed Chapter 13 bankruptcy. I don't know what the hell Chapter 13 bankruptcy is. So, what I do is I call a guy that I trust and know, who is familiar with the foreclosure, bankruptcy type stuff in real estate. Um, very, very knowledgeable in the space and knows how the game is played, right? So of course I want to leverage my resources and say, "Oh my gosh, thank gosh I know this guy. I'm so blessed to have met this guy to help me through this situation. What do I do? What do I say? What does it mean? Does it mean that they get to stay in my house or I in the house that we sold to them? Um, without having to pay? Does it mean that they're claiming bankruptcy and they have no money? Is that what bankruptcy is? So all these questions go through my mind. And so when I reach out to the guy I know, and if you guys need a resource for bankruptcy and how the game is played and maybe some of your options, I could connect you with him. And I don't know, maybe he does consults for this kind of stuff. It'd be very helpful. And so, now we're in a place where I have to, oh, and by the way, my partner's out of the country. And so the mortgage is due every month, and I'm paying the mortgage. So real estate investors, newer people, more experienced people, make sure that that account that you have has enough money in it to pay 2, 3, 4 months of mortgage payments. In situations like this, could happen with a renter that you have to evict. I don't know, anything. So my partner's out of the country. I'm having to cover all the mortgage because it is what it is. Um, until he comes back, maybe he'll pay into the account once he gets back. Maybe he doesn't have service. But yeah, so we're going through this chapter 13 bankruptcy. So basically how I see it, and God, there's so much stuff going on right now. I can't remember everything. But like they have so many creditors. Like a creditor is somebody you owe money to. And I don't want to talk about their personal stuff. But like I don't understand how you can have that many creditors. There's a lot. And so I guess what chapter 13 bankruptcy means is you can write off some of those debts, but it excludes the house. So essentially, like they're asking for forgiveness on the money owed to us, claiming chapter 13, saying, hey, we're trying to get rid of all this other debt, and then we're going to come up with a plan to pay you what we owe you in those 3 months of mortgage payments and whatever else. On the chapter 13 bankruptcy paperwork, there was a date. July 11th, I believe, is a date where they go and they go under oath and they answer a bunch of questions. And I don't know what it is. I've never gone through it. I've never heard of it. But my resource, my guy, my ace in the hole, he's badass, by the way. He said he would get on there with me because he knows what questions to ask. He knows how to look at what this chapter 13 bankruptcy paperwork looks like and what they're trying to accomplish with the payback method. So let's just say I'm going to use made up numbers. Let's say they owe $20,000. They have like anywhere from 3 to 5 years to pay it off, depending on what the judges say, right? Like call it that. So let's just say it's 20,000 and they get to pay it off over 60 months, which would be 5 years. That's $333 a month. Okay. Now, I may be wrong here, but I think that does not forgive them from having to pay the mortgage. And the mortgage, let's just call it $3,100 a month. So they have let's just say they have all these debts forgiven somehow. And now they want to pay what they owe me over 5 years, which is like, call it $300 a month. If they owe me $300 a month on top of the mortgage payment, which is already $3,100 a month, but they haven't been able to pay the mortgage already over the last 3 months and are asking and telling me they can afford $1,000 less than they're paying now, how in God's name are they going to pay the actual mortgage plus the $300? I'm going to call it seller finance, the financed portion of the debt. I don't get it. I don't understand. Maybe I'm not paid to understand, but I'm going to learn real quick. And I'm going to go through this process, and hopefully I'm able to share with you at some point, um, what the outcome is, and how I handled the situation, and maybe what I can do to give you some advice if somebody files Chapter 13 bankruptcy, or if I can just give you a resource to use, right? Like a lot of us are going through this blind, including myself. So having the right people around you that understand what you don't is super valuable. Um, so yeah, this is our other property in Colorado that we're currently going through. It's a bit of a mess. It's very painful right now. Luckily, there is equity in the property. So long term, I think everything's going to be okay if we can either get these people on track or get them out of the house. Like I'm not trying to, put anybody on the street, but at the same time, I don't want to be on the street. I have to pay. If I have to pay, I want you to either pay or I want you out so I can get somebody in there to start paying. Reasonable, right? That should be reasonable. But anyways, that's our update on this one. That's where we sit. They're now 3 months behind. Oh yeah, the servicing company said that they have resigned from this file. So don't exactly know what that means. I'm still trying to figure it out. I hope I don't have to go through this without the um, access to the servicer who can. I mean, they did send me the payment history, which is nice, but it's a little bit confusing on what the words mean in there. So, anyways, thank you for listening to me blabble. I'm going to put this on YouTube. I just uploaded my last video on YouTube. I don't know what I'm doing, but F it. Who cares? Throw it out there. Thank you guys.